welcome to another episode of About the Authors, TV Historical Edition. I'm your host, Jake Brown. The author's prose is rugged and unflinching. Esquires raved of Kyra Davis Lurie's The Great Man, on which the Chicago Review of Books argued that literary retellings have always been popular, but recently these stories have drawn in a wider audience by adding racially and sexually diverse characters to original retellings of the mostly white literary canon. This is a trend we hope remains, and it's one exemplified by Kyra Davis Lurie's new novel, which coincidentally comes out 100 years after The Great Gatsby was first published. Cosmopolitans, meanwhile, promise that her Soapy Cats mystery series packs a bigger jolt than a venti latte at Starbucks over sex, murder, and a double latte, passion, betrayal, and killer highlights, obsession, deceit, and really dark chocolates, lust, loathing, and a little lip gloss, vows, vendettas, and a little black dress, vanity, vengeance, and a weekend in Vegas, 12 Days of Christmas, 7 Swans a shooting, and chaos, desire, and a kick-ass cupcake, and she joins us today to talk about it all. Kyra, welcome to the show. Before you were taking readers back in time on the page, if we travel there with you to childhood, who could we have found you first discovering a love of storytelling through as a reader?
Probably The Wizard of Oz, the books. And my mom, I mean, these are fuzzy memories. We're talking really little, right? But I still do remember her reading those books to me. And I mean, I was probably in preschool and 5 and 6, right? And she's reading like the whole series to me. And and I love them. And I basically at that age did my version of fan fiction with her, which I would make her. We'd have to do our version of Oz. I'd be Dorothy, and she'd have to play all the other characters. And then my mother said she realized I was developing, I was becoming more like a well-rounded person when I decided I was going to be Dorothy and the Wicked Witch. Like, and but just like jumping off point for that and like losing yourself in this narrative, I do still have like really precious memories of that. And again, it was from the books and the 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 arc and the epic adventures of like I mean, because if you read beyond the first book, there's flatheads, there's so many things, right? And I was entranced. I loved it. I just loved it. So yeah, that's really where it started, I think.
When you rewind back through your academic track, any academics who you remember being especially strong cheerleaders of your craft as it developed?
I really think I need to credit my go back all the way to sixth grade. Okay. And it's interesting because my grandmother, who was very much, I mean, she lived next door. So she was like very much part of my life. Right. So like, and she always wanted me to be a writer. I mean, like from when I was a little kid, it's like, and she was like, I just see you're going to be a writer. You're going to be a writer. And I was like, no, no, no. And I didn't have a lot of confidence. And I don't think I went to it was a very good private elementary school. But and some of the teachers were great, but some of them, well, let's put it this way. I'm sorry, I turned it off. It's like I was the only Black kid, not just in my class. I may have been the only Black kid in the school, right? And um and I didn't really fully understand how that was affecting my experience. And then, and nobody really wanted to talk to me or brought it up, like, maybe this is what's going on, right? That you're being treated a little different. I didn't know. And then I went into sixth grade and I had this teacher, Stephanie Americapon. And my first day in class, she came up to me and said, I know your fifth grade teacher. She told me all about you. And the minute that you walked in this door and I saw the color of your skin, I threw it all out the window. You have a fresh start here. And I, it was like this revelatory experience. And this teacher who was willing to tell me the truth, you know, um, and and she was so creative. I mean, immediately I idolized her, right? Immediately. And I felt I was okay in her classroom. And it really gave me, and so she was very into theater. She was very into writing. She really advocated for me. I felt like I could write a story and it would be seen in a fair lens, you know? And um and I really feel like that's was sort of the beginning of my blossoming um as a writer, as a student in every way. Um so I entered some class contests and stuff and won some things that Stephanie, I mean, she was one of those teachers that would go by her first name, right? Stephanie was all behind me on that, right? Um and I really and that's when it's like the first time that what my grandmother was pushing me to do, and it took me a while to get there, but it began to even feel like it was a possibility for me. So yeah, that was the beginning. And also really understanding how welcoming and warm the creative community could be, that might be a place I want to be in.
The Hollywood Reporter, in taking viewers back to the dawn of your writing career, shared that Davis grew up in Northern California and studied fashion design and merchandising. After working as a department store manager for Nordstrom, doing sales and marketing for a sports club, and becoming the mother of a son, she turned to writing for the first time as her first marriage was breaking up. The fictional erotic trilogy of books, Just One Night, which have sold more than 500,000 ebook downloads, have been optioned by Anonymous Content, which plans to develop it for television. Between those early successes and that of your popular Sophie Katz mysteries, which took shape over sex, murder, and a double latte, passion, betrayal, and killer highlights, obsession, deceit, and really dark chocolates, lust, loathing, and a little lip gloss, vows, vendettas, and a little black dress, vanity, vengeance, and a weekend in Vegas, 12 Days of Christmas, 7 Swans, a shooting, and chaos, desire, and a kick-ass cupcake. When you first meet a character like thriller author, amateur sleuth Sophie Katz, that you really connect with on the page, what's it like to then get to know her, even as readers do, over the number of mysteries she solved that followed?
Oh my God, Sophie was my lifeline. Like, I was going through a really hard time. I needed somebody fun and and spunky, and who just a little bit messy, but also took care of business, and even if she did it in a sort of a roundabout, crazy way with her support group of friends, and um, I didn't really I didn't really know what I was doing when I was writing her. At first, I was just like, she was like more of an escape for me. I'm just going to write this story. Um, I had discovered amateur sleuth novels, and which I hadn't really read in earnest before. And I found a couple authors I really liked, but I also felt, and I won't name them because after I read a couple of their books, I realized I was basically reading the same story over and over and over again. It's like, and I'm like, okay, I really like the energy here, but I'm not. There's a story that I'm not. There's. I've read this story, and so I kind of use that as a jumping off point for myself, um, and started to write the character and the story that I wanted to read, and I couldn't quite find. And so it was very much a personal project until I realized it was more. and um and it's interesting because I created her as my friend, and what I hear over and over and over again from readers is that she's their friend, right? When and I feel I have a certain level of guilt right now because I still hear people like, "Are we getting another?" Like, because they miss her. This is their group, right? Like she and her friends and her family is other people's support group too, right? And I'm really grateful I was able to provide that not just for myself but for other readers. It justifies, I think, the importance of escapist literature. There is this sensibility among some that there's something wrong with reading a book that isn't, dark, or that you don't come, you're not reading it for purely intellectual reasons, or it's not something that could be nominated for the Booker Prize, whatever it is, right? And the thing is, and those same people won't necessarily judge you for watching reality television or a sitcom or a comedy in the movie theater, right? And we all we all need a break. We all need sometimes to just that is cathartic and it's important. And so when someone writes me and says, you know, my daughter was really premature and I've been reading your book aloud by the incubator, and it's really been getting me through, that's value. Okay, I'm sorry, that's value. That person is not going to be picking up Dostoevsky. That's just not going to happen at that moment. They need something else, and it shouldn't be a problem that that thing is a book and not a screen. Yes, working the muscle was exceptionally important. I don't think I could have started. In fact, I'm 100% certain I couldn't have written my last book at the beginning of my career. That just I needed I do I'm proud of where I started. But every author wants to believe they're getting better, and I do believe I have. Um I also want and talking about crediting different things for your writing. There's certain things that have come relatively natural for me. Dialogue has never been a problem for me. People talk to me about how difficult humor is. I don't find the humor to be difficult. Um, but setting, keeping your readership in a setting without slowing down the pacing of the book, because it's not like a script, right? In a script, someone does the scene, you just write the action, the dialogue, you're there, right? And you don't have to keep reminding them they're in the there's trees all around them. Or there's like it's a busy street. And so at the beginning, I really went back and studied Anne Rice, because Anne Rice, no one creates a sense of place like Anne Rice. Every city her stories are set in, they are a character. Okay, I don't care if you're in New Orleans or in 18th century France, it doesn't matter. You are there and it's part of the story. You are immersed in it. And I really, without having ever met the woman, she has 100% been my teacher. And although I don't write fantasy, it doesn't matter. You pull from, you get teachers from all different places. And I really encourage writers not to stick to their genre in their reading. They need to spread it out, because you will be surprised what you find. So I really feel like I've learned from her, and now I'm extraordinarily gratified that I get that people come to me with these compliments of like, wow, I really this place was a character. I really felt like I was there. I think I managed to do that.
You're reading my mind. So, traveling there, how you created an enthralling historical novel, The Great Man. It's a story that owes as much to your ability to reinvent yourself as it does to F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, the iconic 20th century critique of the American dream, which provided a touchstone for this novel. The Los Angeles Times revealed in the cover story on your exciting new era of your publishing career as it arrived here, sharing that while you visited family regularly in LA, you stayed up north where you penned the lighthearted Sophie Katz series. In 2022, they report you heard a story on KCRW's Curbed Los Angeles about the residents of South LA's West Adam Heights neighborhood, nicknamed Sugar Hill after a community of wealthy black Harlemites. Learning about the sumptuous soirees Academy Award winning actor Hattie McDaniel hosted in her Sugar Hill mansion, you realized there was a hidden black history waiting to be unearthed. By the time the author heard about Sugar Hill and its famous inhabitants, you were ready to take on a more nuanced challenge. Many literary agents weren't receptive to your change in genre, but as you continued researching the neighborhood and its history, you knew you had a story here to tell. Take us back, if you would, through some of your earliest inspiring moments that followed after you decided to cleverly flip the Great Gatsby trope and tell it from the point of view of Charlie Trammell and how he was a representation of the real affluence among LA's African American elite that you explore here in such vivid depth.
I chose 1945 Los Angeles because of a real history. I was listening to our public radio station, KCRW, and they were doing a story on our neighborhood in LA, West Adam Heights. And West Adam Heights was LA's Beverly Hills before we had a Beverly Hills, right? All the LA aristocracy lived there. And then in 1929, stock market crashes. All of a sudden, maintaining a mansion seems a little bit out of reach for some of these people who've been living there. So they need to sell but who has the money to buy? And the only people that had money to buy were the newly wealthy African Americans. So we had black business moguls, black hoteliers, black oil tycoons, and of course black Hollywood. And so by the 1940s, this was a majority black neighborhood, and what but it was, and I shouldn't say but, and it was exceptionally wealthy. So Hattie McDaniel was one of the people who lived there, the woman who plays Mammy in Gone with the Wind. And she would have these gala parties where Clark Gable and Lena Horne and Bing Crosby were there, and Duke Ellington was the entertainment. And so I heard about this place. I live in Los Angeles. I didn't know it existed. And it sounded positively Gatsby-esque. And I'm like, but it was real and it was black. And I was desperate to know about this neighborhood and this period of time. It sounded fascinating. It is not how we envision the black experience at that time. This is not a community that gets a lot of attention or any attention really. So I just dove into that, and I decided I was going to reimagine The Great Gatsby, but set it in this real world setting. So use this familiar story to elevate this unfamiliar part of Black history. And so what I did then was I took my Nick is Charles Trammell and Charlie. And he's just served in the 761st in World War II. He's come home to Virginia, where he's the son of a sharecropper, and he's there. And guess what? As usual, as is the case with almost the end of almost all of our American wars, black soldiers were not exactly welcomed when they came home. So, in fact, if anything, it made them a target. So he has a cousin out in Los Angeles. Who periodically writes, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, come, come, come!" Right? It's fantastic. It's amazing. It's fantastical. And she's one of those people who always says stuff like that. She is an over. She is a sort of Pollyannish, over the top figure. So he's not totally sure to trust it, but okay. He goes to LA, and she is, married to this man and living in what is West Adam Heights, which has now been dubbed LA Sugar Hill. And his eyes are opened to a world that he did not know existed, the from the Battle of the Bulge, or then and Jim Crow Virginia, to like this Eden of black affluence. It's just this huge transition. So we follow him, and we kind of get to see him through his eyes, the drama of this neighborhood, because there is drama. It's like, for one thing, there's conflict within the community. There's the black business moguls who feel like the black celebrities are taking these demeaning roles and undermining the entire race and impeding their efforts for social progress. And the black celebrities who want the black business moguls to get off their back because they're taking the roles that are available, and at least there is black visibility in Hollywood instead of people doing blackface, right? So there's tension there.
Once you began chronicling this incredible piece of Hollywood history, not generally known to the public, what sort of real systemic racism of the time did you uncover and really want to expose readers to on the page here?
And then there's also the remaining white residents. And the remaining white residents, there is, when these people bought these mansions, when the African Americans bought the mansions, almost all of them had racial covenants on the deed. And so on the racial covenant for each of these deeds, it said the only black people who were allowed to live in these homes had to be working as servants to white people. That was written in, and that was to be true, hold true, from the time it was written to 2035, right? They had it very specific, right? So the white residents are putting together a legal challenge to get these people who are minks and diamonds and all this stuff literally evicted from their homes. So you have people of extraordinary wealth who are now at risk of homelessness, right? And um and so Charlie comes into that world and sees all of this going on, and and it's it's complicated and it's alluring and it's dangerous.
Set among LA's black elite, a young veteran finds his way into post war, pulled into a new world of tantalizing possibilities. The Jewish Book Council shared with curious readers of Charlie's journey. And with such an entertaining cast here, who did you most enjoy spending time with here among the co stars on the page?
Yes, it's the Great Gatsby, so I have all the people, you have the cousin, she has her husband who's problematic. And then you have this figure who's outside of both the black business community and the black Hollywood, this extraordinarily wealthy, mysterious man where nobody's really sure where his money comes from, but he has these great parties. You have the whole thing. And um and it was so great. I mean, because it's like I got to bring in, so I have my fictional characters that the jumping off point was Fitzgerald's characters. And then I have all these historical characters that I bring in, both um, people from the civil rights and black business era that people don't necessarily know, and one of the most important black lawyers, that also Lauren Miller, that a lot of people don't know, he's in there. But then you have Ethel Waters, you have Hattie McDaniel, you have Lena Horne. I get them all. I got them all. That's the essence of the great man. And again, the mysterious character, his name is James Mann.
When in the world did you ever come up with such a great nickname for him as the Reaper?
There's very few people who will know this. So I can't tell you exactly because it'll give something away. But what I can say is I heard there is an LA based indie rapper here, Fed Jewel, and he had in 2016 he had this release of this album Fuchsia, and on the title track there is one line that really hit me, and I thought, okay, I have to embody that in a character or work. That has to happen. And so from that line, I gave this guy the name Reaper. I that's it's like, if people tell you what, if people actually get to the end of the book and they want to ask me about that, my DMs are open. I will tell you, but you got to get to the end because otherwise I give away too much.
United Women of Color felt the way that you interweaved historical figures with the fictional figures was magical. In that spirit, did you have any favorite real life characters of the day to inhabit here you felt made an important difference in Tinseltown among actors and actresses of color at the time?
People like Hattie McDaniel, that's what's interesting about Hattie, is that she, in so many ways, she really did do a lot to advance the rights of black actors behind the scenes, right? In terms of, like, joining SAG and getting she advocated for Lena Horne to become the first uh, black woman on the SAG board, and that absolutely would not have happened without Hattie. Um, but she did play into white racism, not just on the screen. She did it off screen too, for her work. So she allowed the publicity departments to put out things that made her seem like she was Mammy, right? And so where that gets tricky is that some of the things that she was quoted as saying, I'm not really sure if that's performative or if that's actually what she would have said. So there's a court case um, where afterwards she comes out, and I've read many different articles where it says she came out and says, "That's a mighty fine judge," right? And then I found a Time magazine article that was written by a reporter who was at that court case that came out right after it. And she was quoted directly, and she said, um, words cannot express my appreciation. Now, there's a big difference from mighty fine judge to words cannot express my appreciation. So how did that happen, right? Was it just that she allowed the publicity department to twist things so that the white audiences could still feel comfortable with her, or did she say two different things to different, two different reporters? I don't know. um what I do know is that I kind of took a path down the middle there, because I know she's capable at least of doing both. Yeah. If nothing else, I know she's capable of doing both. And so she was probably the trickiest. Everybody else, I mean, Lena Horne didn't do that. Like, Lena Horne was like, no, she didn't play that game. Ethel Waters absolutely did not play that game. I mean, she was actually labeled difficult because she didn't play that game. And um, one of her directors asked her why she was being so difficult. And she said, because Lincoln freed me too. I mean, I loved being with these historical figures, but yeah, it's when people ask, like, I was recently asked which of your fictional characters, I know, like, of the main cast of fictional characters are Anna, Terrence, Charlie, Marguerite, and James. And they said, which of these characters were the most difficult to create? And none of them were difficult, right? But trying to create fictional dialogue for real people, that's hard. And that's new for me. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And maybe it would be less of a challenge if I didn't feel such a burden of responsibility. I know that when people read historical fiction, or if they watch a movie based on a historical person, that actor or that character becomes the person. That's it. That's all they'll know from it. It's like, people who read Hilary Mantel, Thomas Cromwell, that's him. It's like she reads this whole story about Cromwell. It's three books. As far as anyone's concerned, it is Cromwell is the character in Hilary Mantel's novels. I don't History books be damned. And I'm not saying she researched them exceptionally well, so maybe it is, but the point is that that's how they got him. That's how they got his character, from her pages. So I really didn't want to do them an injustice. I do not paint them as perfect, but I didn't want at all, but I didn't want to give them flaws that I didn't have evidence of them having.
Talk, if you would, about crafting the dialogue of each personality, especially the way they spoke then versus say now, being authentic to the times.
The things that I did to really help me there, I did research, um 1940 slang. That was I did a deep dive there, and I had to be really careful too. There are words and expressions that I assumed existed in 1945 that did not, right? And so I was cautious about that. Um, then, I was whenever I could find an interview or a transcript, from one of these people, I listen to it. And for the celebrities, they exist, right? You can find a little bit here and there. I'm also really fortunate that so many of these people wrote, like, editorials or letters to the editor, to the black newspapers, so I can read those through. um I really, yeah, I mean, the more that I could get their voice through their actual quotes, the better, right? They were easier. And again, just getting their words and then learning their learning their voice and being able to transfer on the page. That's how I did it, by actually reading and listening to whatever words I could from them. Fortunately, there are some people who wrote some, I don't know, I hopefully I can say this is like, both the men and the women, there was a few, there were definitely some kind of bitchy letters that they wrote. Like, that I can say, oh, okay, I see where you're like, I see where you're being judgy. I see where you can, like, I see where your issues are. I can exploit that. And I'll give you that. But um I'm not going to I'm not going to say that you are homophobic if I don't know that you were actually homophobic. I'm just not going to do it. Um, that's important to me. So it's like, and if you have that responsibility, you have to. then crafting that dialogue in that time period, you just have to be careful.
The Chicago Review of Books mused at one point during their glowing review of this work that it creatively reimagines the memorable Gatsby plot and characters with some remarkable twists, including a real life legal case. Talk, if you would, about bringing readers inside the courtroom for that trial.
It was actually the trial happened in 1945, and I very much immersed myself in that trial. And it is the lead up to that case, as well as the case itself, is a central a central component of the story. In fact, I would say it's one of the driving forces of the story. Um, yes, again, it is, and maybe that sounds odd because that obviously has nothing to do with Gatsby. Um, Gatsby for me, it was really just taking the the dynamics of that kind of capitalism and seeing what it looks like in a black community. And how that looks like in a black community is that while you still have the same, you know, domestic issues and rivalries and tensions within the community, because like in Great Gatsby it's old money and new money, and here it's the business community and celebrity. um but you have all of that in addition to what the racism that was part of our governance. I mean, it wasn't just part of individual people's perceptions, it was law. Racism was law. I think that's really important to remember. And I know we don't always like to, but it was, but that's what it was. You know, there were legal contracts saying Black people can't live here. Um, and so to have, so what is it like to be that wealthy and have to deal with that kind of threat? I really thought it was important to put those two things together. So yeah, it's and delving into the case, this was a very high profile case. It was racial covenants were exceptionally common, but the celebrity of Sugar Hill brought this to a different kind of notoriety. You know, the idea of people were being kicked out of their homes left and right, but it's different when you're kicking out Hattie. It's like, and when everybody's mammy, right? Um, so and it's also interesting when these people that again, Hattie McDaniel at the time, Louise Beavers, she was also a star and as big as Hattie at that time. She lived there too. These were people that were being portrayed as mates, in off and the studio wanted you to, and like the studio even put out press releases suggesting that Louise Beavers was doing housework for her white co-stars between films, and that was absolutely not the case. She lived in a three-story house. She, loved. I mean, she had poker games every Sunday. She hated to cook and clean. You could find her smoking a cigar and watching boxing, and like all the time, right in the front row. Um, so she was not her characters, but but that was the perception, and so then all of a sudden, for things to sort of for that veneer to start to crack because of this court case, um, that's rich, that's and so again, I found there was definitely a lot written about it in the black press, but it seeped into the white press too, and so there was a lot to read up on, and transcripts and the like, and the lawyer who argued that case, Lauren Miller, he um, it's there were lots. Eventually, he went on to the Supreme Court to and argued against racial covenants in front of the Supreme Court, and he won. And that's why he is why we don't have racial covenants. It was him. He argued two cases had to do with racial covenants in front of the Supreme Court, and in front of the Supreme Court, he won. He won both times, and he also is the person who wrote the majority of the legal briefs in Brown v. Board of Education. So yes, and we don't know his name, So again, it was really nice um, elevating his name in this book. Um, but there's so yeah, it was a major theme. There is so much written about it that, and yet it's so little known. It was everything you could want as a historical fiction author.
Did you wrestle at all over the ending of the story, or did it appear clear to you from the start the note you wanted to wind up on?
I let Fitzgerald and Gatsby be my guiding hand there, so there are definitely parallels in the ending. Um, I would feel like a it's net. I was not, I did not feel like I was really that it was a leaping off point for a sequel or anything. It's not that, I mean, I guess I could.
Is there a chance fans of the story can look forward to a sequel?
It was a pleasure to live in this world. And the research itself was so rich, to the point that I feel like I have to write another book in the era because you couldn't get it all in, right? And I did want to be really conscious while writing this book. There's a pacing, there's a story. It's really easy to fall in love with your research and just jam it all in because you want people to know it all, right? And I had to hold myself back. There were a lot of deletions. It's like there's no reason for this story. I know it's really interesting, but there's no reason for this story here. Um, that's hard. It's like you want to tell. So maybe I can find, maybe the next one I'll bring that in, different story, same period. And again, if I were to write another book in that era and place, which I might, there's a high possibility that some of the characters would move over because, again, people like Lauren Miller was so active all over Los Angeles in so many ways, that it seems almost unlikely that you would be dealing with certain segments of the Black community in Los Angeles and not dealing with Lauren Miller, right? So that might happen, but I don't see that. That's more of a, I don't, that's not a sequel. It's like, it's I don't want to say it's a cameo appearance either, but it's a different thing. It's the same world, but it's not a sequel. And I don't intend to do a sequel for this. I think it's really, I've done through my career before this almost all series and sequels, right? And there is something liberating of being able to say, I'm done. Like, it's like that story is done, and now I can move on to something fresh, and it's my choice. Rather than um, going through apparently the existential crisis that George R. R. Martin is going through and like having the world like, where is it? Right. So I don't have without having like, oh my God, everybody's waiting for this. I can just go to the next creation and start fresh and bring in what I want and leave out what I don't want.
Sounds like a plan. What do you most enjoy about diving into a new project like this one?
Right now it's mostly research and um boy, it's to me that's one of the joys of moving into historical fiction. If you love history, there's so much to discover. It's just and so many little tidbits when it's not like just studying, you're studying World War II or something. Okay, but this is you're going into the minutia of a time period and these little stories that almost never get told that you're discovering and unwrapping. And some of them are engrossing, fascinating, revelatory, delicious. It's um it's it's really such an incredible journey. And so I I struggle to see if you really dig in, it's got to be hard to just let go and then go to a completely different period because you are absolutely going to have to leave some stuff on the cutting room floor, and some of it is so good. so so yeah, so anyway, so I am working on it, not today. It's like but I have been and will be.
Take viewers who were curious about the experience inside yours as you became a New York Times bestselling author.
I've been on the New York Times bestseller list, and people are like, "Oh my God, you're going to be buying a home on the hill, and it's going to be like 5 stories." I'm like, "No, no that's not happening." Like, thanks. I live in California. No. Like, and um, so yeah, it's like, but that's not why we do it. We're no one gets into this for the money. You do it because this is where your soul is. This is where your heart is. You can't stay away from it no matter how hard you try. Um, and chances are there's some periods of time where you're looking at your bank account or your life or your friends living a much easier life. You're like, oh, should I try? Like, but you can't. You just can't because it's just it's inside you.
Finally, what's your advice for a writer pivoting into a new genre and how to make that transition as smoothly and successfully as you have?
The number one advice is, and this is going to sound cliche, but oh my God, it's really true if you're transitioning, is perseverance, because you are not, people are not going to necessarily welcome the change. Um, Particularly if you've had, you know, even moderate success in what you've done before. There's going to be a lot of pressure to stay there. And when you introduce something new, trying to get people to see it through a lens that isn't that tainted is the wrong word, but it's the only one I can think of at the moment. Tainted by your previous work, right? It's like, okay, you are writing lightweight comedic mysteries, and I'm reading this with that in mind, right? I'm reading this new book with that in mind, and then that sort of changes your experience with the book. Um, and and so you have to keep you just have to keep pushing this. Write what you want to write, because as we've pointed out, you're not going to make the chances of you becoming Bill Gates doing this is low. Um, so you might as well write what you're going to write, what you want to write. But also, don't be dissuaded by the first no, by if you're going to a new agent or a new publisher or whatever. And um, and if you need to, I end up sort of doing this because now I'm Kyra Davis Lurie. I was Kyra Davis. You need to take a different name. That's okay. It's like it it's you, and it'll be your face and it'll be your whole thing. But if that ends up if you need to do that to just get your foot in the door, um, or to signal to readers this is a slightly different book, um, as Nora Roberts does with JD Robb. I mean, Nora's doing okay. So like, so be open to those kind of things. So that's my advice.
Kara, it's been wonderful talking today. Thanks so much for taking out time to be on About the Authors TV.
Thank you so much.